Fernand. Fernand. Fernand.
Bonjour et bienvenue au cadre de Fiscalité. Pouvez-vous confirmer votre lettre d'équipe?
G.
Est-ce que vous préférez la lecture de règlement en français ou en anglais?
En anglais.
For this case, you'll have 20 minutes to make your presentation in front of the judges. If your presentation lasts under 18 minutes, you'll receive a 1-point penalty for every 30 seconds. If your presentation lasts under 10 minutes, your team will receive the score of 0 at the general ranking of this case. If after 20 minutes you have not completed the presentation, you will be stopped to move on to the period of questions. At the end of the presentation, the judges will have 5 minutes to ask them their questions. I remind the jury that it's mandatory to ask a minimum of 1 question during the period. If after 5 minutes you have not finished answering the question, you will be stopped. Throughout the presentation, I will indicate the remaining time using cardboards at 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, and 30 seconds. I will make a countdown using my finger for the last 10 seconds. I remind you that it's prohibited to say the name of your university, and you will receive a penalty. I also remind the public that it's prohibited to use any electronic devices during the presentation, and that the public must stay quiet until the end of the period of question. Before we begin, I'm asking the room to turn off your cell phones and put them on mute so that they don't interrupt the presentation. I will now ask the judges to present themselves, and after you will be free to start your presentation.
François Louis XVI, IG Gestion de patrimoine, directeur régional pour Boisbriand.
Fernand Loisel, directeur régional IG Gestion de patrimoine, bureau Montréal-Centre-Ville.
Martin Diane, directeur régional, IG Gestion de patrimoine, Talbot-Machet.
Vanessa Tremblay, directrice en services fiscaux aux sociétés privées chez PwC.
Baudelaire Gaël Delvert, fiscaliste chez Revenu Québec.
Well, good afternoon, Nancy. Before we start, I just want to say I can relate to you because I too come from a family of small business owners. So I understand the blood, sweat, and tears that you pour into running a small business. What I also understand is the immense tax burden that comes with running a small business. That's why today, Team G Consulting, composed of myself, Gabriel, and Nick, will be presenting to you our recommendations to have the lowest tax burden for you and your family. And what we're trying to do today is to treat you like our family, is to give you the recommendations that we would give our own family so that ultimately you and your family can enjoy the lowest financial impact from taxes. And now I will pass it on to Nick to take it away with the rest of it.
Okay, so for today's agenda, we will begin with some key information about your case. Then we identify the main issues that we will be solving today. And finally, we will be giving some recommendations and the possible alternatives for these recommendations. And then finally, we will be giving a quick summary on all our recommendations for the different problems. And then we'll have a brief question period. So for the key information, yes, Nancy, we know you're the main shareholder of Les Assoiffés, and you are also looking to retire comfortably in the future, and also, as my colleague said, take care of your family in the process. In addition, we know that you have been preparing your son Justin to be the future CEO, and also that you are planning on giving your cottage to him in the near future. So also for some of the key assumptions we made within the information we were given, so we assumed that the unaudited financial statements were equal to the audited financial statements. Also, we had to make the assumption for our analysis in order to assume that the book value of the assets was equal to FMV. And then finally, we also assumed that Justin did not currently have any other property than the one he was about to inherit. So the main issues that we identified today was one, estate planning, also the transfer of the cottage to Justin, then finally the non-strategic investments that you are using for your future retirement, and finally some of your personal tax issues.
So in terms of estate planning, because QSBC qualifications is a really important qualification to meet in terms of when you're looking to get rid of your shares of LA Inc. So in order to meet your QSBC qualifications, this would essentially allow you to utilize your elective capital gains exemption, which is a really, really large amount. And there are 3 things you have to meet in order to utilize them. So one, you have to meet the 90% test. So 90% of your assets have to be used towards earning active business income in the year of disposition. And we actually determined that this, unfortunately right now, is like 83%. The second rule is that 50% of the assets have to be used towards earning active business income, and this in the 2 years prior to disposition, and you meet this rule quite comfortably. And finally, you would have to own the shares for at least 2 years. So in terms of only meeting the 83% test, we would recommend to buy back the life insurance policies, and then this would allow 100% of the assets to be 100% of the assets to be used towards earning active business income, and then you can therefore use your life capital gains exemption. So if we're looking at, we determined essentially 2 options in where you can sell the business to your son. So in the first option, if we're looking here, right now, this is the current structure of the company, where Nancy, essentially, you own 100 common shares of Nancy Management Incorporated, the holding company, and then the holding company owns 100 common shares, 100 Class B common shares of LA Inc. You yourself also own 100 common Class A shares of LA Inc. So therefore, we would just recommend to do 2 things. One, you would do a Section 86 share phase, where you would convert your 100 Class B common shares into preferred shares, and then you would then sell your 100 Class A common shares directly to Justin. And if we're looking at the tax impact, essentially, you mentioned that the fair market value would be estimated around $2.5 million. So about half of that would be transferred, would be sold to Justin. So about $1.25 million would be sold to Justin. And because the ACV of the shares that you're selling to Justin is $100, this would result in a taxable capital gain of $1,200,000. And then you mentioned that you've utilized half of your lifetime capital gains exemption in the past. So essentially, the full amount would be shielded from taxes. However, we don't believe that this is the best option, because one, you would still be liable. You would still be indirectly liable for the business, because you would still be indirectly controlling the business after you retire, after you make the sale to Justin. And Justin may not want control of the company, and we decided to look at an option where we allow for more flexibility for you and Justin. So for the second option that we determined, again, we have the current structuring right now, and we're recommending a corporate restructuring method. So essentially, you would be selling all of your 100 Class A common shares. You're putting all of your 100 Class A common shares that you own directly of LA Inc. into Nancy Management Incorporated, and instead you'd be taking 100 more common shares of Nancy Management Incorporated. You would then be converting your 100 Class B common shares of LA Incorporated that you own indirectly through Nancy Management into 100 preferred shares. And what you're doing, essentially is you're going to have one remaining common share that you're going to be putting in the family trust. And what this allows for is for the family to retain future control of the LA Incorporated in the future. And then by the time that you want to dispose of the company, you have the flexibility of either transferring the company to Justin or transferring it to a third party seller. And when you do so, you're able to multiply the lifetime capital gains deduction that you're using, not only with your own lifetime capital gains deduction, but by all the human beneficiaries that you have subscribed to the family trust. And essentially, what the purpose of Nancy Management Incorporated is to allow for the purification of business so that you can meet the lifetime capital gains exemption. So as we mentioned, in order to meet the 90% rule, you have to have 90% of the assets be used towards any active business income. So for the assets, so you can do a dividend in kind of the assets that are of the passive assets from LA Inc. to Nancy Management, and this can be done on a tax-free basis because they're a related company. And then essentially this would be your tax impact. You would have a taxable inclusion of $33,000.
All right, so I'm gonna jump next with the transfer of the cottage. So this was also another thing that you asked us to consider. And so basically, in order to recommend you the best possible option for your needs, we made two assumptions. So the first one being that the $250,000, its fair market value includes both the land and the cottage. So in that sense, the cost for both would be $155,000. And the second assumption is that the cottage could be transferred to Justin in 2019. So we would use the fair market value of 2019 for us to be able to consider this within the options that you asked us to look into. So the first option is the bequest. So basically, leave the property to Justin in your will. In Canada, there's no tax on transfer of estate to beneficiaries. However, there is a tax on the estate at a trust level. So when, after basically you're passing away, unfortunately, there's going to be a testimony trust that's going to be set up. And what this means is that there is going to be a tax when this trust is going to be set up automatically. However, the benefit in this is that there is going to be 1 year of the main residence that could be attributed to the cottage when the calculation of taxable income is done. So basically, you get 1 year shorter and you don't pay capital gains tax on this 1 year. And in this option, an important consideration is the fact that the adjusted cost base is the fair market value. So the next option is the preferred pricing. So in this case, what we've considered here is the fact that the CRA requires non-bank transactions to be made at fair market value. So what does this mean is the fact that regardless of what price you sell to the property, the cottage, to Justin, the CRA will always require for you to make it at fair market value without having a bump in the adjusted cost base. So this definitely is not the best option for you. And just to give you an idea of the taxable capital gain, if you sell it at fair market value, it is going to be for $47,500.
And because there's no bump up in Justin's adjusted cost base, there will essentially be a double taxation when he sells the property.
Exactly. Thank you.
So finally, for the option of the donation, so we would essentially be transferring the property to Justin at a cost of $0. And then, this will be considered a non-arm's length transaction. And as in the previous case, you'll be paying $47,500 of taxes. However, we believe that this is the best option because in the future, when Justin disposes of the cottage, he can use his primary residence designation and he wouldn't be paying capital gains taxes on the disposition of the cottage.
All right, so next, another issue we looked into was the non-strategic investments of Nancy Management, the holding corporation that you currently own. So in terms of the investments features, there's first the participation in a subsidiary. So with regards to this, we decided that the best choice for you in this case would be to simply leave it as it is, so no change. However, for stock placement, there is a consideration to make, given the taxable capital gains that would be incurred in case you decide to sell this investment are about $209,000. However, since it's a holding company that doesn't have any active business income, there isn't going to be any lifetime capital gains deductions that you could use in order to mitigate this taxable capital gain. However, what could be definitely a great option for you would be to sell and reinvest in safe investments. So since you've been expecting downturns in the economy, definitely this should be something you could do in order to guarantee the cash flows in the future. So you could use it definitely to get retirement income to the means of dividends. So once you've retired, you could use this income that you've reinvested in order to get afterwards at a lower rate. Because if you take it currently, your taxable income, if you transfer it now, your taxable income is going to go through the roof. You're going to have to pay 33%, which is the highest marginal rate. So this is something you should avoid. And by transferring to you as dividends, as your retirement income in the future after 10 years. This way you guarantee that you pay a lower bracket in terms of taxes. And so without here, we just wanted to make a comparison with a taxable capital gain and without it, considering the taxable income that Nancy Inc. would pay. So in the case without the stock placement, the tax that you would have to pay would be about $39,000. Well, with the investment, definitely it would be higher. However, we believe that this option is definitely worth because this would guarantee you a lower tax now and retirement income in the future. So with the placement, the tax payable would be $144,000. So I'm going to pass it on to Nick to give you some recommendations about your personal taxes.
Okay, so for your personal situation, as of now, by reading your case, what I can see is that throughout the years you've been recommended to seek remuneration through dividends and not a salary. Through some preliminary calculations, we could see why your ex-advisors could have gone this way, but we prefer, instead of the dividends, we came out with a salary, so this is how we did it. So first for the salary is easy. You just get taxed right away with the 45.71% rate for your tax bracket of $100,000. But then with the dividends, it gets a bit more complicated. So later on, if you have any questions, I could go through with you about the gross up and all that. But what we did is, when you seek dividends, you're also eligible for federal tax credits and also provincial credits that actually save you taxes. So then, through the dividends, what we could see here is, yes, you're making more salary of $58,000, but with salary you're making $54,000. But then over here, we have some reasons. So one thing that dividends isn't considering is EI and CPP considerations. So basically, the Canada Pension Plan and employment insurance isn't included in your dividends. Then also, these give you personal tax credits, and also it also gives the corporate, your company, some deductions for EI and CPP. So this is why even though there's this difference, we recommend taking the salary. Also, there were some other considerations, such as the life insurance policy that you took out, and this was deducted by your company, LA. But then it's also a shareholder's benefit toward you, so you're being taxed more. So then some other things that we discussed was that you would like to maximize your future. So ways to do that is to maximize your RRSP and TFSA in order to have some safe investments some further safe investments, and some further help when you get older and decide to retire. Also, since your husband is of a lower tax bracket of $45,000, you could also use income splitting through RSP. So then quickly, a summary of what we discussed today is, firstly, for estate planning, is that you should go with the corporate reorganization option. Also, for the transfer of the cottage, the best way would be to use a living donation option. Then for the non-strategic investments, as my colleagues mentioned, it would be best to sell the investments and then take the dividends out in the future when you need it. And then finally, for yourself, yes, as I discussed, I think it's better for you to take the salary in order for you to have access to these benefits for your future. And this is where, if you have any further questions, we welcome any questions, and I hope that our speech gave you answered your insights. Thanks.
As far as retirement, we would like to keep the revenue of 100,000, so we'll be able to maintain that revenue.
Okay, so basically, in terms of dividends, depending on the type of investments you make in the future, you could definitely keep this income with following your retirement. So under the form of dividends, you could kind of get income from Nancy Holding Company, Nancy Inc. And so this avoids the higher taxation currently and guarantees the cash flows in the future, well, after your retirement.
Because we're recommending safe investments,
Yeah.
we would assume that the amount of money that we have currently invested in the holding company would remain around the same.
For the college, you recommend to proceed with a donation,
Yes.
and what will be the tax consequence for me?
So for you would have to pay it would be deemed to be disposed at fair market value.
Okay.
So you would have to pay $47,500. Yeah.
And is there a way to reduce this capital gain?
Could you repeat the question, sorry?
Is there like a tax attribute or an exemption that I could use to reduce my capital gain on the disposition of the cottage?
Right, so basically,
Well, you can sell it to your son at fair market value, but you would essentially get the cash and you would be able to pay off your taxes. But because we assume that your son doesn't have a lot of current income and wouldn't have enough money to purchase the cottage off of you, we would recommend essentially to do the donation at $0.
So if Nancy would suffer a critical illness or a disability within the next month, what would be the game plan for the company?
the company, what the company could do is also, in case that happens, they could set up a Section 86, and basically she could take preferred shares that guarantee her an income, while she transferred basically the operating part of the corporation to her son, who would eventually run it. She could also sell it. That's another consideration that she has to account for.
Because our recommendation is to put the common share into the family trust. The family trust owns basically the ownership of the company, and then so if Nancy were to suffer something, it would basically continue through in the family trust. So her family would have ownership of the company.
So who would run the company? You assume that the son could run the
Yeah,
company?
we assume that the son would be able to pick up right off where she left off.
We made this assumption basically because there was an intention from his side of taking over the business, in a sense that he was already involved in the business, and so continuing would be a fair assumption from our side.
And also, what we learned was that he also has experience in running multiple facets of a business, not just strategically, he has basically all of them. So this is why we think he'd be a good replacement, short-term and long-term.
You suggest to buy back the life insurance policy, and but it was a requirement from the bank. So if we were doing estate planning, if this requirement is still existing, what can we do?
So one of the things would be to go and renegotiate with the bank, because kind of we need also right now the management is under one way and they're planning on going in a different direction, right? Because she said she's retiring in the future. So I think it would be a good time in order to start like refinancing and talking over like the plan with the banks, because the banks invested in one person, but in the future with another person there needs to be a new set of conditions.
Donc, ça conclut la période d'été, j'espère que c'est...